A lot of people aren't sure if they want to keep Portland's mayor around for another 4 years, or if they want to try someone completely new. So tonight, we've got the candidates going head-to-head in our debate, and they agreed to do it virtually, unlike the president. Also, free preschool sounds like a parent's dream, one that could become a reality if you vote for it.
For a lot of families in Multnomah County, it's actually something that's unaffordable and out of reach for them.
But of course, there'd still be a price tag and higher taxes for some. And we're remembering an Oregon congressman who was a trailblazer for the environment and an enemy of nuclear power.
Oh my God! This is the most stupid thing that has ever happened in the Northwest.
Here's the story.
Okay, let's get started. I'm Dan Haggerty. Hello, welcome to The Story. Big mayoral debate tonight on KGW. Lots for us to talk about. And as you know, this isn't a one-way conversation, all right? So tell me what you were thinking. Ask me a question, send us an email to thestory@kgw.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. Just search my name, Dan Haggerty, or use Twitter in the hashtag HeyDan. Now, before we get started tonight, I wanted to say something that's kind of important to me. Can we do a close-up? You mind where we starting here? Here, okay. Come on in. I wanted to ask you something. I want to ask you for a favor. Can we focus up? I mean, we keep saying that we're living in these unprecedented times, and that's because we are. And this is an important moment for our city and our country, and for your kids and your parents, and for you and for me and all of us. So please don't get distracted by the noise. The internet is an amazing tool, but it can steal your train of thought. It can gobble up your sanity or confuse you if you're not careful. So I need you to stay focused. We live in Oregon. We know trees, don't we? Please don't miss the forest. Can we do that? Please. Let's get started with the show. Okay, on that note, our big story tonight is all about Portland's race for mayor. So we got the incumbent, Ted Wheeler, trying to convince voters to give him a second term after all the chaos this city has been through this year. Then we have the progressive challenger, Sarah Iannarone, whose beliefs are really much more in line with the protesters we've seen in the streets since the spring. Tonight at 7 o'clock, you're going to hear from both of them face to face in our debate, or rather virtually face to face. We recorded this last night to make sure we didn't have any technical issues. We kept it safe. The candidates, they dialed in from different locations. I have to say, it really worked pretty well for us. Maybe it's something the presidential candidates could give a try. Yeah, I doubt it. Now, I want to bring in Laurel Porter, who moderated alongside Everton Bailey Jr. from the Oregonian. Laurel, you have been part of a lot of debates here at KGW. This one was pretty different for a lot of reasons.
It sure was, Dan. We have partnered with the Oregonian on debates for nearly 20 years, almost from the time that I got here. The first one we remember is from 2002, the gubernatorial debate between Republican Kevin Mannix and Democrat Ted Kulongoski. The debates are always an exciting time here. The studio's full. It's all abuzz with the candidates, their supporters, an audience, timekeeper, the panelists, moderators. This time, it was a much quieter event. As you mentioned, for safety reasons, during the pandemic, Mayor Wheeler and challenger Sarah Iannarone were at separate locations of their choosing. My co-moderator, Oregonian City Hall reporter Everton Bailey Jr. was here at KGW in the studio with me, but we were socially distanced by at least 20 feet. It was quite different, but nonetheless a very important debate during a critical point in time for the city of Portland as the city faces the pandemic, resulting economic crisis with many people suffering and struggling, and protests and unrest over racial justice and police reform. Portland voters will decide who they want to lead them through those crises for the next 4 years.
All the things you just mentioned, I mean, the mayor just really finds himself in such a tough spot. And there was this recent DHM poll that I know you're aware of where he is actually behind Sarah Iannarone with likely voters by 11 points. I mean, she at one point was looked at as a long shot. Now granted, a third of the people in that poll said that they were still undecided or maybe they were going to write in another candidate, but still a bit of a surprise and a tough road for him, right?
That's right, Dan. The mayor does have a tough road ahead for the next few weeks before Election Day. He needs to make his case that even though his approval ratings are low and 2/3 of respondents in a poll said the city's going in the wrong direction, he needs to convince voters he's the right person to see the city through those challenges ahead. And Sarah Iannarone, for her part, needs to show that she's not just an alternative to the mayor, but she's prepared and qualified to lead the city with a multi-billion-dollar budget, 6,000 employees, and 28 departments, even though she's never held elected office or led a major organization.
So how did they, I know it's a big question, and that's why we're all going to watch at 7 o'clock, but how did they make their cases?
I hope people do watch. I think a telling point came when the candidates asked each other a question. Iannarone asked Wheeler about his low approval ratings and how he could think he was doing a good job and should be reelected with those approval ratings. Wheeler expressed optimism for the city throughout the debate, but then admitted in answering Iannarone he really has been distracted by all the crises and not able to campaign. He's focused on the crises instead. And he also talked about his own personal crises, the death of his friend, colleague, Nick Fish, his mom, and going through a divorce, but said he's not given up and he wants to continue to do the good work he talked about several times during the debate and hopes he wins to serve another 4 years.
What did Wheeler ask Iannarone when he had a chance to ask her a question?
And he asked her about those qualifications. He asked her what relevant, direct experience does she have to lead the city through these crises and manage a large city with a $5.6 billion budget. She called it a valid concern, one she's been asked a lot before, but she said she won't be alone in dealing with the budget. She'll have a team around her and that she brings different skills to the table she says Wheeler doesn't have. A vision, she says, courage, clear ideas, and a different style of operating. She thinks that's the kind of leadership the city needs.
You know, at the beginning, you listed everything. I mean, this debate could have been 10 hours long. You probably wouldn't have touched on everything. So what other topics can people expect to hear these candidates talk about?
We also talked about the protests, of course, sure. Police reform, racial equity, homelessness, the COVID crisis, climate change. We even got a question from Chef Gregory Gourdea about what are the candidates going to do to save the struggling restaurant industry. They both think it's very important. We did pack a lot into an hour, but you're right, Dan, we could have gone 8 hours. We hope everyone will tune in at 7 p.m. tonight. We hope it gives our viewers some more points of information to make an informed decision on November 3rd.
Laurel, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ted Wheeler's facing an unexpectedly tough re-election campaign against his more progressive challenger, Sarah Iannarone. So how did they get here? Let's start with the mayor. He began his political career in 2006 when he was elected chair of the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners. 4 years later, he was appointed state treasurer by the governor after Ben Westland died in office. Voters re-elected him in 2012. Wheeler was expected to run for governor, but that changed when John Kitzhaber resigned and then Secretary of State Kate Brown took over. So instead, he set his sights on becoming Portland's mayor, with Charlie Hales deciding not to run for re-election in 2016. A big campaign promise was to take on homelessness, pledging to create a shelter bed for everyone living on the streets. He got a bunch of endorsements and easily defeated his challengers, which included Sarah Iannarone. Then, though, came the hard part. The homeless crisis, of course, seemed to get worse, and Wheeler admitted he underestimated the problem when he was running. Then, earlier this year, the nightly protests against police brutality began in Portland, often becoming violent. Police responded with tear gas, flashbangs, and other crowd control tactics. Wheeler, who is police commissioner, has gotten a lot of criticism from activists who have called for his resignation. At the same time, he's been a favorite target of President Trump, who claims he's lost control of the city. Though it is safe to say the president wouldn't be any more of a fan of Wheeler's challenger. Sarah Iannarone is a community activist and political outsider with a much more progressive platform. She finished third in the 2016 mayor's race with less than 12% of the vote. But 4 years later, she doubled her support in the May primary, coming in second to Wheeler with nearly 24% of the vote. She's been a big critic of how Wheeler's handled the protests, promising more aggressive police reform if she's elected. But she's gotten her own share of criticism, including when she refused to denounce violent protests on Straight Talk with Laurel Porter. Since then, she has denounced the violence. And Iannarone's pulled ahead of Wheeler in a recent poll, though in that same poll, 29% of voters say they're still undecided between the two or are writing in another candidate. And that's how they got here.
Regardless of who gets the job, it's not an easy one. Wheeler is actually trying to break a streak of one-term mayors. The past 3 have only stuck around for the 4 years, and then they were gone for various reasons. Charlie Hales was expected to run for re-election in 2016, but decided not to after Wheeler announced his intention to run. His reasoning was that he wanted to focus on getting done what he wanted to get done in office instead of spending time campaigning. Sam Adams gave the same explanation when he decided not to run for a second term in 2012, but he also acknowledged a lack of support from voters who tried to recall him twice. You may remember there was a scandal over a relationship he had with a 17-year-old legislative intern, which he lied about. And that led to an investigation by the Attorney General, who did clear him of any criminal wrongdoing involving the age of consent. By the way, Adams tried to make a comeback, you may remember, earlier this year by running against Commissioner Chloe Eudaly, but he came in third in the May primary and didn't make the runoff. Now, before Adams was Tom Potter, and you might remember him as the former police chief who pushed for police reforms during his tenure. He decided not to run for re-election in 2008, saying he wanted to spend more time with his family. In fact, the last mayor who even decided to run for re-election was Vera Katz, who served for 3 terms from 1993 to 2005. When she died in 2017, the Willamette Week called her the Rose City's last successful mayor. And whether you agree with that or not, she certainly left behind a political legacy in Portland that we haven't seen since. Now, ballots are getting sent out next week. So let's talk about one of the big measures that Multnomah County voters will get to decide on, and it's universal preschool. It's Measure 26214. It would make preschool tuition free for all 3- and 4-year-olds in the county. The plan would prioritize children in marginalized communities who don't have access right now to preschool. It would also guarantee that preschool teachers make as much as kindergarten teachers. This would also be funded by an income tax on higher income earners. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to look at some of the reasons supporters are pushing for this. I talked to Multnomah County Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson about the affordability of preschool for people who live in our area. Did that come up? Did you find that people were surprised that this wasn't already a thing, that there were kids out there who weren't able to go to preschool, couldn't afford it?
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest thing as we were working with, a really large community coalition to talk about what preschool should be, was just the fact that for a lot of families in Multnomah County, it's actually something that's unaffordable and out of reach for them. Oregon has the 4th most expensive preschool in the United States. And when you couple that with the really high cost of housing we have, too many families have to make the decision that they can't afford to work because preschool is just too expensive for them, right? And that's a reality for a lot of families, but most families don't know about it. They know it's hard. They know that, because the cost of preschool is so high that it's even a struggle for, I think that the average family in Multnomah County, but a lot of kids never get the opportunity to even go to preschool. And that makes a huge difference. It makes a difference when they enter kindergarten and they're already behind their peers in terms of the classroom experiences that they've had, in terms of the number of words that they've been exposed to. And teachers see and can tell the difference when they're in kindergarten. And unfortunately, it's a difference that really stays, their whole lives. It's not something that kids are able to catch up on. So making an investment in preschool is so important. Making sure we have the public support so that every family in Multnomah County has access to it. That's exactly the goal of what Preschool for All is.
Let's talk about what she was talking about there at the very end, about how it sticks with them for their lives. There are studies that show there is a lifelong benefit to preschool, like the Perry Preschool Project, which found that kids who went to preschool did better in later grades. They were more likely to graduate from high school. They actually earned more money by the time they were 40. They were also less likely to get arrested during their life. The study also found multi-generational impacts, with preschool not only benefiting the kids who actually went to preschool, but also setting up the foundation to benefit their kids in the future. Now, the other part of this measure would make sure that preschool teachers earn a living wage. See, right now, the median salary for preschool teachers in the metro area is about $31,000 a year. This would bump that up to the median salary for kindergarten teachers, which is more than $74,000 a year. Assistant preschool teachers would make no less than 75% of that, which would come out to about $55,000 a year. This is something that Peterson says is crucial to supporting the entire child care system.
We also know that the workforce, people who love to be preschool teachers, who love to interact with our 3 and 4-year-old kids and really give them a joyful learning environment, have a really hard time staying in the field because the salary, the wages for those workers is nowhere near where it needs to be. It's not a living wage, right? A preschool classroom teacher makes about half what a kindergarten teacher makes here in Oregon. And we are losing too many people in that field because they just can't afford to stay in it. And we also have a hard time of getting new people in the field, people who might love to have this as a career, because they can't make enough to earn a living, and schools really can't say like, yes, go into this field because this is going to be a really, this is going to be a job where you can make ends meet with it.
Okay, now let's talk about the controversial part, because, we can't do this for free. If we want to fund it, someone has to pay for it. And the measure is proposing tax on the top 8% of earners in Multnomah County. And here's how that breaks down. A single person making more than $125,000 a year will be taxed at 1.5%. And couples making more than $200,000 a year will be taxed at that same rate. That will increase, though, to 2.3% starting in 2026. But if you make more than that, there is another tax. Income for individuals over $250,000 will be taxed an additional 1.5%. Same for couples making over $400,000 a year.
A lot of people are still worried about how the post office is going to handle so much mail-in voting this year. But keep in mind, we've been doing it this way for decades here in Oregon. Better check, though, with the people running our elections.
How confident are you in the U.S. Postal Service?
Very confident.
Confident enough to tell you to make sure and send those ballots in early. When the story continues.
Welcome back. I'm going to use some special powers here. I know your phone is in your hand. I know, predictable. But while you have it, might as well scroll through Instagram, maybe give us a follow at The Story, KGW, or me, Dan.Haggerty. You can send me a message on there, but there are plenty of ways to get in touch with us. You can also send us an email. You can leave a comment on my Facebook page, or of course, use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. I want to talk about the mail for just a moment. A lot of people have been anxious about the mail, and we've been getting a lot of questions about it, like, will ballots be delivered on time? It's something that Kyle Aboshi has been looking into for weeks. In fact, he's actually been testing the postal system by sending letters across the country.
For generations, the U.S. Postal Service has been a trusted institution. But lately, there's been a lot of worry about our mail because of the coronavirus, chronic understaffing, and pressure to change operations.
Tonight, the escalating battle over the U.S. Post Office.
With so many people concerned about getting their letters, prescriptions, and of course, mail-in ballots delivered on time, we decided to test the system and track the mail. For the past 8 weeks, I've been sending letters to friends, family, and coworkers. The letters were sent from the same post office in Portland. Most went to people living in the Portland metro area, but I also mailed letters to others all across the country. Overall, I found delivery was pretty consistent all 8 weeks. Letters sent in town, meaning the Portland-Vancouver metro area, took about 2 to 3 days. Letters sent out of town, including the Midwest and East Coast, landed in mailboxes within 4 to 5 days. National mail tracking data suggests, indeed, most mail is being delivered on time without major disruption. And that's important, especially with an election only weeks away. How confident are you in the U.S. Postal Service?
Very confident.
Yeah, I'm very confident in the post office's ability to get ballots to people and then those ballots back to us after they've been voted.
I spoke with several election officials across Oregon who explain they have long-standing relationships with the post office.
Oregon's been doing vote by mail for over 20 years, so it's not something new. It's not like we're state X that is just now learning about vote by mail. So not only do we know, but all of the post offices in Oregon also know how to process mail.
In August, the U.S. Postal Service warned election officials in Oregon, Washington, and many other states of potential mail-in ballot delays. To avoid any problems, Multnomah County changed the recommended deadline for putting ballots in the mail from 5 to 7 days before the election. By encouraging people to send them in earlier, it ensures ballots arrive on time, explained Tim Scott, director of Multnomah County Elections.
So we wanted to make sure that whether somebody was in Yachats or whether they were in East Multnomah County, their ballot was going to get back. So we're saying in Oregon, 7 days, and it'll get to us.
For Oregon voters, the important date to remember is October 27th. It's printed on the envelope carrying your ballot. That's the last day to safely return your ballot by mail. After that, don't blame the Postal Service for delays. It's on you to deliver your ballot to a drop box.
Okay, Kyle Aboshi joining me now. So, Kyle, it seems like everybody involved in this process seems pretty confident.
They are confident for good reason. We've been doing this a long time. It's been successful over the years. Additionally, election officials say the numbers are promising from what they've seen already. The overseas and military ballots, those are the ones that go out much earlier than everybody else. They've already started to see hundreds of those returned at this point, and that's a good indication of what's to come.
Yeah. Considering that, though, has there been a conversation about maybe relaxing these strict deadlines, considering the unique concerns we're having with the Postal Service?
There has been some general discussion, but generally speaking, this is state election law that dictates this. Ultimately, voters have to get their ballot to election officials by 8 p.m. on election day. There's no wiggle room there. There's no excuses. So as a voter, you've got to take responsibility, have a plan, and get your ballot in at the correct time. Additionally, one common mistake, and election officials say they see this every year, people forget to sign the outside of the ballot. And it's really critical because your vote will not count unless it's signed and submitted in a timely manner. So definitely have a plan, get it in early.
Got it. Kyle Aboshi, thanks. Now, I want to take a moment and remember a former Oregon congressman who died this week, and we want to dig into the KGW vault to do so. Jim Weaver represented Oregon's 4th District from 1975 to 1987, which includes Eugene and Roseburg. He was a huge environmental advocate. Here he is, second from the left, with President Jimmy Carter during the signing of the Endangered American Wilderness Act in 1978. We found some old KGW reports showing his battles against nuclear power plants and the timber industry.
Weaver has fought against the Whoops nuclear plants for years.
$2,000 million for this lifeless trunk sitting over there at Satson. Don't you say, oh my God, this is the most stupid thing that has ever happened in the Northwest.
Weaver also blasted the private utilities.
So what you're saying here is that you're ready, willing, and able to spend Portland electric users' money to complete that
That's
plan.
not correct, Mr. Chairman. It's an oversimplification, and I'm not going to play your political games.
Weaver released confidential government documents regarding timber sales in the Tongass National Forest in Alaska. Letters from Agriculture Department officials to Justice Department officials ask that criminal proceedings be started against a subsidiary of Louisiana Pacific and the Alaska Lumber and Pulp Company for filing misleading records that resulted in lower prices that the companies pay for government timber. Weaver's investigators point out that Louisiana Pacific Ketchikan pays $3 per 1,000 board feet of timber in the Tongass National Forest, timber that would sell for $150 in Northwest states.
The Forest Service has many remedies, almost none of which they've taken. I question the 50-year contracts, whether they have been breached, and I question the fact that a thorough investigation should be made by the Justice Department.
We love the vault. If you have any ideas you want us to dig around in there, email us or use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. We're going to read some of your comments and finish the story right after. That fly keeps buzzing around in here. We'll be right back. All right, we're almost out of time. Let's get to a couple comments here. Tom writing in, does the mayor of Portland really matter, or is it the form of city government that's the problem? The mayor matters. Let's just get that out of the way right away. But the city of government is an antiquated style. It's a commission style. We're the only big city that uses it. You can find some of our past stories on the KGW YouTube channel kind of explaining all that. And then Marty said, how would the free preschool affect nonprofit preschools like ours, a network of parent cooperative preschools? That's a great question. I don't know. I didn't ask, but I will, and I'll let you know what I find out. That's the story for tonight. See you back in more.